every year with the Concept Art Awards is we have an award show, and we go through all of the top films and shows, animation, games, everything, and do artist outreach. And then we realize that we're sitting on a massive data set. My family are academics, so I knew that data sets are important and should be shared. So Dr. Yalda Uls was wonderful enough to come and do a study around all of this research, and we are so excited for her to share all the things with you. Yalda, I don't see you. Oh, you're, oh, sorry. Dr. Yalda Uls, everyone, from UCLA Center for Scholars and Storytellers.
Okay, I seriously think everyone should stand and shake because, like, I'm going to be the boring data person after that amazing woo stretch. Okay, feel free to do it during the talk. I'm very informal. So let's see. Oh, cool, my slides are up. I am so pleased to be working with the BRIC Foundation and the Concept Art Association. And I also want to thank the amazing women we worked with, Allison Mann, Nicole Hendricks, the data geek, and Rachel Menarding. In fact, I remember Nicole when we first spoke many, many years ago, and we had been introduced through Jamie Azar, who's our social impact manager, who's over here, who went to, raise your hand, Jamie, who went to a BRIC online conference and said, you got to meet these women, they're amazing. And Nicole told me she had this treasure trove of data, and she was so excited about it. And we were like, oh, data, we're so excited. I know, it's not really relatable. And so finally, we were able to access it. They were able to fund us to pay a fellow to analyze it, to clean it up and analyze it, because that's really the very, very boring part of data. So I want to thank the first author of this research, who was a fellow of ours. She's getting a PhD, and her name's Lindsay Roberts. She couldn't be here. She's at UC Davis. And Alicia Hines, who's back there, who's one of our director of research. She's awesome. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Yalda Uls, Dr. Yalda, and I am actually a former movie executive. I was in the film business. I made movies a long time ago. I was a senior VP at MGM. I started at Sony. And then I got a PhD in developmental psychology, like one does when you leave the business. You get PhDs, right? You know Nicole's going there. And so I then launched the Center for Scholars and Storytellers to bridge these worlds, to bridge the world of storytelling. I was a storyteller who cared passionately about the impact of my content, and to bridge the world of science. I believed science and research and social science research and developmental psychology research, these kinds of things can really support storytellers. So I launched the center about 4 years ago. We're in our 5th year. And it has grown, it has been embraced, it feels like I was right. And as a former storyteller, I try to create the research, I try to make it easy and accessible. And we create tools as well, all free on our site for storytellers. So why diversity, though? That's one of the issues. We call it authentically inclusive representation. I'm a daughter of Persian immigrants. I identify as a woman of color. And my very first movie that I made in the studio system was Mi Familia, My Family. Anyone know it? Yeah. It's a very old movie. And it's a story about immigrant assimilation that I completely related to. It starred Edward James Olmos and Jimmy Smits. It was produced by Francis Ford Coppola, also a child of immigrants. So as a daughter of Persian immigrants, I was drawn to content that portrayed marginalized communities and our experiences. And then I thought, okay, studios are gonna do this, right? The rest of my jobs are gonna make movies like this. I am gonna be able to make all the kinds of movies about marginalized communities I want to. Nope, didn't work back then. So back then there were no advocacy groups and DEIA was sidelined at studios. But cut to 2023, it's changed quite a bit. Okay, let's see if my clicker works. Woo! Much changed landscape. industry has changed. And over the past several years, entertainment leaders have pioneered efforts to increase diversity and inclusion, and audiences continue to demand stories that reflect the truth and complexity of their experience. So we see this through quantitative data, and there's so much of this data out here, yet we still hear studio executives saying, really? People at the very top, does it really make more money? It's because of this person, or it's because of that. There's always some excuses. But this was even true back when I was an executive, and that's how I got Mi Familia made, was that people of color, Black and Latine, we say Latine, people, they buy most of the movie tickets. So the data shows that multicultural people buy most of the movie tickets, and now streaming, they watch most of the content as well. So, and we see this also in our own research. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. This is a study we did that got a lot of attention. We released our first one in 2020. We have released this one in 2022 with CAA, and we're going to continue to be doing this with CAA and Nielsen. And what we found, and probably not surprising for anyone in this room, we're going to try to do it for television too, but larger budget movies, 4-quadrant movies, make way more money at the box office when they're thought to have authentic and inclusive representation. And that is more than just who's behind the camera, who's in front of the camera. It's the actual storytelling. And the storytelling is where, all of these voices, what Sekou talked about, this disruption, this diversity because it has innovation, that's where we need more and more voices. So diversity and inclusion have a major influence on the commercial success of creative projects, and we have found that over and over again, and we hope to keep finding it. We also try to measure biases, because, back when I was an executive, people would say, internationally, nobody wants to see a star of color. Nobody wants to see a woman. They're still saying that, like a long time later. So we did a survey of several international territories, and we found that actually more people internationally say they want multicultural content. 75.3%. I think in the US it was around 65. So, of course, someone's gonna say to this, well, it's self-report. Just because they say it doesn't mean they'll buy it. So we're also trying to prove they'll buy it. They also said, and this was a US stat, the 60.4, that they wanted diversity behind the camera. The audience is paying attention to who's behind the camera. The younger generation in particular, who we focus on, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, lots of letters, they in particular are in fact, under 18, they are majority people of color. And as you have heard, 2045, US will be majority people of color, but under 18 already is. So there is a very diverse group of young people that are demanding to be seen. And they pay attention to who's telling the stories, and they pay attention to the stereotypes. And they also care a lot about women. So this work is making a difference with on-screen representation of marginalized communities continuing to grow. And I do recognize, and this is just talking about representation on screen, we still have a long way to go. We need natives, Latine, disabled, MENA. I am part of MENA. They have, there's still a lot of work to do, but I am really, really encouraged by all the voices of the advocates and the change that they are demanding. So people like BRIC and many, many, many other people, it has changed from when I was an executive, where the diversity, equity, and inclusion groups now report to the presidents of production. They used to be back in HR, so that's a good thing. But nevertheless, if any of you, did anyone read the New York Times Brooks Barnes article that came out in December? Yeah? Anybody? Okay, well, I'll tell you what it was. It was basically he interviewed a whole bunch of top executives, and they were like, we overcorrected. Bros didn't work, so, X didn't work, Y didn't work. So we overcorrected. So we think that, we don't need to change things as much. So even though, after George Floyd, the goodwill was huge, young people were demanding it, but 2 years later, people are already starting to question it. So that's why we need to continue to push this data, continue to advocate, and because they have really deep networks. Sekou was talking about how, you look at someone and you're at the top and you want to have someone like you who agrees with you. And it's easier to hire someone. Those people. It takes more work to find new people. And they may not have quite the experience you need. But what I'm encouraged about is our networks are strong. We, collaborating with BRIC and the Concept Art Association, this is one of the many partnerships we've nurtured that proves our network of people who want to support creatives, inclusive storytelling, and DEIA B just added a new letter in the industry. So we have strong networks too, and thank you all for being here. That's it. No, I'm just kidding. Now I'm getting to the data. So let me tell you, in order to have truly authentic and inclusive representation, we need to have diversity at every level, and above the line and below the line. So this was a very innovative study. I do not believe studies like this have been done. There's very little. We know like IATSE, for example, is not diverse at all. We need to start measuring those things as well. Because of this data set, which needed a lot of cleaning, we considered race, ethnicity, and gender diversity among concept and visual development artists. How many of you in this room are concept and visual development artists? Raise your hand. And how many of you work with concept and visual development artists? Okay, so we looked at animation, live action, games between 2018 and 2022 in movies and TV, and the data was collected by the Concept Art Association, and we examined 2,274 artists. Now, we also are going to try to now collect this in a more systematic way. So there's a survey. My team, Alicia and Jamie, have a little table out there with a QR code. I probably should have put it on my deck. Sekou was very smart with that QR code, but it's out there. So please fill it out so we can start tracking people and seeing who's coming to these events, who's, what your trajectories are, et cetera. So we coded for race and gender. This is the way many people do it in academia. We had 3 coders, I believe, and they found publicly available records of people either self-identified in the publicly available records, or they made a decision on gender and race based on the way the person looked, and then they had to agree across all of the coders. Some people, we couldn't find any information. We sent out a survey, and those people self-identified. So that's how, and if you have any questions about the methods, the report is out today, actually, and I think the Hollywood Reporter reported on it, and it's on our website. The method is fully detailed, or you can ask us. Okay, so what do we do? So what do we find? So guess what? Anyone surprised? We were like, this is a little boring. We're seeing this over and over again. 75% were white. 72% were male. So sadly, or we had nowhere to go but up, right? And to give a little context to this, we got a few quotes. This is Philip Boutet. Being a Black male working primarily in live action costume, my experience within the concept artist community has been a storied one mixed with feelings of personal triumph, juxtaposed by creative dissonance. This is due to feeling isolated in the face of great successes. It's important for everyone to see themselves represented visually within their workspaces, and I have strived to make that playing field more evenly distributed to inspire the next wave of up-and-coming artists. So the stuff is real. The ones that do succeed feel alone. I mean, that's what the B means, belonging. That's what the I means, inclusion. So we got to get more people at the table. We also looked at production types and found basically across the production types, say averages, but live action was particularly bad with perspective to people of color, very few people of color. And gaming, not surprisingly, had a higher than average percentage of male artists. So certain industries, if any of you are in here in those industries, you have even more work to do. And then finally, we wanted to see if things have changed over time. So in our authentically inclusive representation study that looked at movies, we looked over 11 years, or maybe 10 years. The last 5 years, we saw that there were more authentically inclusive films. The people that were judging these films were saying that they represented authentically inclusive storytelling. So, and we believe that advocacy groups are making a big, big difference, and that is why the storytelling, more people are seeing themselves. But we did not see, well, we looked, and I'll show you what we did. So we did see some good progress for women. So that's like, look, way back, I guess when you guys started, 2018, only 9.8% were women. Now it's almost over a third. Obviously not at parity, but quite well improved. The transgender and gender nonconforming artists, even though we had to rely on self-identification for that. So there may be more, but what we measured was that there was less than 1%. So obviously a lot of work there too. But this is the really sort of headline stat, which I find very sad, that people of color went down. In today's world, where we have so much focus on this, so many people thinking about it, I think maybe the female went up because there's also that women in animation group. There's a lot of groups really focusing on this, but unfortunately, the people of color concept and visual development artists decreased by 6%. So let me read a quote from Wendell and Wild, the illustrator. When people create diverse and inclusive stories, they invite their audience to witness an ever-expanding pantheon of heroes they can admire but also empathize with. By hiring multicultural talent, there is a chance to provide a sense of nuance and truth to those legends and project them from the screen and into people's hearts. I'm so glad to have been able to work on Wendell and Wild and contribute my own truths and visions to such a colorful and haunting fairy tale. A fairy tale where queer and POC storylines take center stage. So, yeah, we believe that, and this is an industry I don't know that well. I don't come from animation. Movies was what I knew, sort of script development and hiring mainstream directors and things like that. But the more I've learned about it, visual development artists and concept artists, they're the beginning of the storytelling. They are really important. When I went to Pixar, I saw the animators' corner, which was huge, and you could see how important they are to the storytelling. They work closely with the producer and the screenwriter to really imagine the worlds. And if they're all men and they're all white, they're just not going to understand a more diverse world. They're not going to understand the specificity of somebody's experience. And so we really need to think about, and hopefully the industry will start thinking about, how we can do better. So this is the beginning. As I said, please take our survey. I do think BRIC's going to send it out as well, and hopefully the Concept Art Association, which of course is named CAA, and I kept going, CAA, what? But in your worlds, maybe that's you're not thinking of the other CAA. So I hope that we're going to track this. They're going to send that around as well. And as I said, there's nowhere to go but up. So that's the good news. The good news is we're all here to hopefully solve some of these problems. I look forward to the conversations. Thank you. Standing ovation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yalda. The reason this is so important, just to reiterate, is if you're not having inclusion and representation in the beginning of a creative project, cannot talk, had too much caffeine, need food, then we're really kind of cutting our knees out from under us. So it's very important that we make intentional hiring decisions. And then the survey. The survey is actually going to be a 5-year longitudinal survey talking about career pathways. So it's not just for visual artists, although visual artist data will be collected. So please, any of you working in entertainment, please take the survey, because we want to really track like our programs, like from advocacy groups and apprenticeship, like over the next 5 years. Is this going to really make a difference? So we're really just trying to track the efficacy, I think that's the same word, of people entering into the industry.